Good morning and welcome to Tracy on Crude. I'm your host, Bob, and we're going to talk a little crude. It's been an interesting 4 days, Tracy, as we said in our very brief pregame. Why don't you just talk about what's going on? Dollar is, of course, rallying, and that's having an impact on crude. But let's get your thoughts.
Well, I mean, basically what we had yesterday was kind of a whole incident of buy the rumor, sell the news. When OPEC came out, I think I was up, it was around 2 a.m., 3 a.m. our time, and, started talking about possible meetings and this and that, the other, and crude started rallying. And then they came out, the Russians said, yes, would, we would, we would actually meet with OPEC and we would discuss a cut. And so crude started rallying more. And then Saudi Arabia came out or said, Reuters actually reported that what was going to happen was they were considering, or they were talking about a 5% cut. And then later on in the day, basically it turned out to be an entire rumor and every news station pretty much recanted it. And so it was,
Yeah, I mean, you didn't believe in that whole Russian nonsense, did you?
No, I even tweeted it. I think I had like a little Russian story. Yeah, no. And I talked to some of my friends that are traders in Russia too, and they were like, never, it's not going to happen. So it was a simple case of buy the rumor, sell the news. And it also happened to coincide with a technical bounce. So you know how that is really convenient as far as that's concerned. And you have to think at these lower levels, what we're going to have, a lot of people, taking profits and a lot of stops being hit just because.
Where do you think a big stop level is? At 33?
I mean, I think, well, now after yesterday, I think, people probably have stops right above the highs, probably around 35 now.
Okay.
As far as the, big stops. Yesterday, you just kept hitting stops as well. So, it was just sort of the whole situation exacerbated as it went up. But I mean, no fundamentals have changed. Nothing's changed. It's fundamentally, we're still oversupplied markets and nobody's willing to cut. So I kind of think that was a nice, bounce for yesterday. And I think we're going to have these bounces. If you look, I posted a chart yesterday where the ranges for the last 4 days have just been huge. But that's going to start happening at these lower levels. I suspect, again, when we hit 25, that's going to be a big, huge take profit zone as well as 23, if we get that far. But, 27 was big for people. It was a big level. Everybody was kind of buying that level. Once it hit, people were like, let me get out.
Yeah, I mean, certainly a lot of money's been made and I guess lost as well. But I'd like to kind of get your global view on what's happening in the oil market. I mean, clearly, the Saudis seem intent on just keep producing. They're in a little bit of a semi-war, if you will, with Iran, who has now been freed up to sell their crude overseas. But I'd just like to kind of get your, kind of your macro view on the crude market.
Well, I mean, right now it's a game of chicken is what it is. And the Saudis are just not going to quit. I mean, they're just not. Right now it's a fight for market share. So market share is who can pump the most and who can get it out of their country the most. It doesn't matter at what price. And that's kind of their thinking. And, along the way, what's going to happen is, shale producers are going to go down. I mean, we've already had 42 bankruptcies this year alone.
I'm sorry, say that again.
We've already had 42 bankruptcies alone in the United States for oil companies. Moody's is putting 175 on review for credit downgrades. And then, we also have debt reconsiderations coming up in April. So what's going to happen is it's going to push most of these smaller producers out, and which will, contract the supply, obviously, and the crude market will go up.
Yeah, I mean, I read a piece, I think it was in the New York Times, it may have been in the Financial Times, about Exxon doing all these deals with small shale frackers that were really having all types of problems carrying their debt. And they basically were just buying in for cheap.
Oh yeah, I mean, there was just a whole article on basically how some of these smaller companies can't even give their assets away at this point. Nobody wants them. They're not, I mean, if anybody want to buy some shale assets, you can on the cheap now. Um, but yeah, I mean, the smaller companies are going to go under. The bigger companies don't necessarily want them. It's kind of a fire sale. And then the next round is coming up as well. Even though Jurgen did just come out and say that PE has like $60 billion that they're willing to invest into in the industry if, the big banks won't re-up these people's loans. But I kind of think if if all this bad debt is out there, I can't really see a lot of private equity jumping on that boat.
Yeah, I mean, I would think that that in general they lack a little bit of expertise, and I think that private equity has had a true mixed bag history in the commodity space in general.
Yeah,
they've tried to get in it and think they know it and can model it and da 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 da, but
no go. Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
it's it's a difficult industry to get to, and I just think if they watch all these uh, companies go down, I can't really see somebody willing to take up all this distressed debt because I just don't think it's just not a good investment really at this point.
Now I've read a number and over time a number of conflicting reports on what it costs to extract shale. I think numbers were coming out a year, 18 months ago or longer, that it was costing huge dollars, high 90 or high 80s to low hundreds. But then subsequently, I read that it was costing $30 to $40. And then just recently, I saw a piece that said somebody was getting it out for $15. Do you have any color to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I mean, as far as the thing is I think when people report this and report sort of some of these numbers, you have to understand there's a difference between how much it costs to get out of deep well, which is a lot cheaper. It's around $10 as compared to shale. Now, the problem with shale numbers is the number is so fluid because technology is constantly improving that they really can't nail it down that well. I mean, so far, they've improved on, how they're fracking, going sideways, wells, they're refracking. So the problem is it's just a very fluid number. And over the past year, that number has decreased significantly, but it's really too hard to sort of pin exactly what the costs are at this point.
Understood. I wanted to go to another point in that same area. I mean, do you see? I had seen another piece about Exxon doing a whole lot of deals with distressed shale, basically wildcatters that were doing these projects. That, along with the fact, now I just recall what I wanted to talk about, was that to shut these fracking wells down, basically to restart them is almost starting from go.
So I mean, well, what's happening is now is instead of what they're doing is they've left. Yeah, they're not shutting them down. If they're open, they're leaving them open right now. Even if they're not pumping from them right now, they will leave them open. So that's another thing when they're talking about all these rig counts, and which is my favorite. The thing is that there's already open wells. You don't need you're not starting as many new wells, but there's still plenty of wells open. We're still producing. I mean, more than we ever have. We're at the highs. Every week it's pretty much we're producing more, and that's again due to technology and things like that. You don't need as many, but yes, there's a lot of wells just sitting there that are open that they're not going to shut down. It's cost too much money. So
Understood. Well, let's morph into just kind of what your general picture on crude is, and of course, as you and I were talking in the pregame a little bit, the dollar and the impact of the dollar and this Japanese move
right.
to to basically make negative interest rates does have some impact here, and maybe you could just give us some color on that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, anytime you have a rally in the dollar, it's going to depress crude prices. So, what you're seeing today is, the dollar is rallying and crude's down, aside from the fact that, it would be down anyway. But, yeah, we're like back up to 99,785. So, but yeah, at any time you have, I also, if you trade crude, you should watch the CAD. A lot of times CAD will lead as far as, kind of knowing where the crude market's going. So if you saw like, CAD was rallying yesterday, but not like crude was. So that was kind of a clue that this was going to be kind of a short lived.
That something was up. Now I think an important thing to also mention is, and I believe this statement only came out within the past month, maybe since the new year. In fact, I guess since the new year, that the Saudis have decided to retain the pegging crude with the dollar.
Correct. So they were discussing it, but I don't think that they would actually ever go through with sort of that. And a lot of people are talking about how the Saudis, they can't sustain these low oil prices and things like that. And I've heard a lot of stories about how they're going to go bankrupt, blah, blah, blah. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. They're also spending a ton of money on refining infrastructure and other internals within their own country, so that they're not as heavily reliant on crude, although it always will be a significant portion of their GDP. But this is not putting them out of business. They're not going to become bankrupt, and I mean they're just not, and especially because the cost to them to extract is so low as well. So
Right.
mean,
I think if we have any retail crude traders on here, I think an important thing to note is that Tracy does have in the background there, she watches Dixie. You watch the dollar quite carefully, right?
Oh, absolutely. I watch dollar and CAD are my two go-to every day. I mean, every day I watch both of those. I mean, you have to in order to trade crude. I mean, you just have to watch them.
Do you find that there's any delay in movement in either the CAD or the dollar and in the price of crude?
Well, often I find that CAD and crude have this weird relationship. Some days the CAD will be leading, and some days crude will be leading. You just kind of got to watch it, but you'll get a feel for it right at the beginning of the day. You can kind of tell which one's going to lead that day. And of course, I mean, dollar and crude pretty much, as soon as the dollar starts rallying, forget it. Crude's taking, or
it's all bets off at that point.
So those are sort of the things that I look at, besides looking at Brent and
well, let's move on to that I've now threatened twice and haven't followed up on, because I've asked a different question in the midst. But let's get just your macro feel on crude as a commodity, and what you see is happening. We've talked a little bit about we've talked around it in terms of the levels and in terms of what impacts it. But let's maybe just get your feel for what's going on longer term, or with 4-6 months, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, longer term, I mean, I kind of think right now like I said, it's a game of chicken. We're going to have depressed crude prices unless something gives. Either they make cuts, or producers are forced out and we have forced cuts, right? What's happening, what I'm looking forward right now is, the next March, April, May are going to be, pivotal time for crude, in that we have refinery maintenance season coming up. We have debt reconsiderations in April, and then you have, the start of summer driving season. So if we're going to see any kind of recovery, I feel that it would, any kind of sort of price recovery, it should be around that time. Not refinery maintenance season will show builds in crude, so not that. But after debt reconsiderations, if these companies don't get re-upped for loans, you're going to have more people going bankrupt, out of business. And then you have summer driving season. So that's kind of where I'm looking for the WTI market to kind of make a decision. Are we going to float or,
as to basically as to where we're gonna settle and trade on a regular basis.
Exactly. I mean, as far as, all of this is going to take a long time before I think we're ever going to see, crude prices like we saw before. But everything's a cycle. I mean, it's all cyclical. So, there will reach a point that, crude gets low enough, producers are forced out, and we'll start seeing higher prices again. It's just the nature of
Understood. Well, I don't want to cut you short. I mean, are there any other specific topics that you wanted to address? We've already kind of run through my list of quick questions. I mean, I am just a mere tourist when it comes to crude.
Yes, I mean, that's another thing too, is, what's making these markets so volatile is, right now we're generally, you have 375,000 contracts per day trading. We're up to, 600 to a million a day now.
Wow. Basically almost a double.
Oh, I mean, going from double and then some. So that's also creating to, this volatility, because suddenly everybody's trading oil and they want to get into the frenzy. But so we're having a way higher volume, and when that happens, you get these wild swings.
Understood. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Any thoughts on the natural gas area?
I don't really watch natural gas that much, to be honest. So I'm probably not the best person to ask for that.
Fair enough.
Just to be honest. It's kind of in my clump of energy things that I watch, but I really don't trade it. So it's not my wheelhouse.
Understood. What do you hear? What do you hear about what the Iranians had offshore already parked? They had ships on the leeward side of an island and all kinds of tankers.
They have 22 tankers sitting out there. I guess 13 of them are full. 22 tankers, outside of their coast. Some of them have already left to Korea. But
left to where? I'm sorry.
North Korea, South Korea.
Okay.
But they've been buying from them even with the the sanctions, they were buying from them anyway. So that's kind of not, that pertinent. But yeah, I mean, they've had their own tankers sitting full for a while. They said they had, the rumors were like, I think like 500 million barrels sitting in tankers off, but there are like 22 tankers sitting off the coast, which last I heard is 13 of them are full.
And then what do we have any feel for what current production is in Iran?
So current production is, they say, they haven't really given what a current production is. They've given current production, what they're ramping up to. So I don't know, and I don't really know if anybody really believes the numbers out of there yet. But of course, they're 500,000 to 1 million. They're ready to ramp up to per day. Is sort of what their expectations are. I would assume that's going to take a little bit to ramp up to, but they do already have enough to start flooding the market.
And this may have actually been based on a tweet from you, but I've read that the Saudis are basically on full tilt at this point. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, I mean, they're, I think their last production numbers, they had backed off a little bit, but what people don't really understand is they use their own crude for electricity. So what happens is they ramp up during the summer, and then during the fall, that production drops off because they don't need as much for their electricity. And then so everybody says, oh, the Saudis are cutting production, which they're really not cutting production. All they're doing is backing off from the production that they personally use for electricity and such. So it's kind of skewed, it's kind of skewed how the media portrays that.
Right. Well, I mean, there's a bunch of people that just don't know what the heck they're talking about. Now, I just one last area I'd like to just delve into, if you have any thoughts, is they have floated bringing Aramco public. Do you have any thoughts? Do you have any thoughts on that?
All I said was I'm in. If there's an IPO, I'm in. I mean, I think it's an interesting concept. Of course, it's not. I mean, it's huge. They're not going to IPO at all. They're going to, IPO parts of it. And I've heard different things. Their refining section or this section. I think it was. They kind of just threw it out there to see, what the response would be. It would definitely have to, I would think, be listed on NYSE because it's just too large for their market. But
I had read London at least was speculated, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it would have to be one of the bigger markets. Absolutely. I mean, their market's way too small. They wouldn't be able to handle it. But I mean, I think it's an interesting concept. I definitely, looking forward to see if it comes to fruition. The company is so huge, it would only be a piece of it.
Right, and but still, even the piece.
I'll take a piece of the piece any day.
Well, the piece would make it, I think, the largest publicly traded entity in the world.
The world, exactly. So, like
yeah,
I said, I'm all.
It's interesting that you say that you'd be a buyer, because I'd like to get your thoughts on this, because my initial concern was that there'd be a total lack of clarity with this entity, that it'd be pure opacity. It would be opaque. And just so your thoughts.
Well, I think, if it were listed on their exchange, I would definitely, be wary of it. But, if it's listed in London or if it's listed in New York, I mean, they have to file regulatory papers and things like that. So, it's not going to go, they'd have to go through the SEC and, there's a whole slew of things of regulatory bodies, in either market that, so I wouldn't, I wouldn't be as fearful, even though I know people hate the regulatory bodies here, but
right. No, but your point's well taken. I mean, you believe that the regulatory, onus that they'd be under would lead to better clarity in terms of what they were reporting and what they were saying.
And I'm sure that they would be, a little more skeptical and a little more thorough, just because it is Saudi Arabia. So, I suspect even if they wanted to, it would take, a couple years at least to even.
Yeah, I wonder where they're going to get the auditors from. They're going to look into that entity. That will be the interesting part.
Oh my God, right? There's a job. So I'm sure it'll take years, at least for that to even come to fruition. But as of right now, it's kind of just an idea that they're kicking around. And I think I sort of let it out to the media to kind of see what initial public reaction would be.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Well, I'm not trying to cut us short here, but we've covered most of the topics that I had on my list. Was there anything else in particular that you wanted to point to or mention? Uh-oh, you froze up. Well, I'd like to thank Chicago Girl for joining us today and giving us her insights on crude. I hope that she'll be back unfrozen. Thank you so much for joining us, and everybody have a lovely day and good luck out there.